Welcome to Torn in Two, Muskegon's political show on WVS 103.7 The Beat. Election day is in 38 days, 10 hours, 58 minutes, and 46 seconds. So you have to get out there. If you have not registered to vote, you got some exciting news. Found out today that President Trump has cut into the lead of Joe Biden, and every vote is going to count. So make sure that you get out and vote. And remember, when you don't vote, it's like you voting for the opponent. So let's make sure we get that straight. More protests out in the streets because of the verdict handed down by the grand jury on the Breonna Taylor case, and we'll be talking about that as well. President Trump's bump, the reason why he's catching up is because of this current reason. And this actually is an interesting story. Last week, after I left the show, I was talking to one of my fact checkers about the show, and we were talking about this particular person, and she called me in later and said that the very person we were talking about had passed away. The person that I'm talking about is Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who became the first woman to lie in state at the Supreme Court and will be the first woman to lie in state today and at the U.S. Capitol. Which brings me to where I get to introduce the top prosecutor, the man we love so dearly. And what I love about him is that he's approachable at any time. And I called him and said, hey, I need to change up the show. Would you do it? Ladies and gentlemen, would you clap your hands for our prosecutor and attorney, DJ Hilson? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be on. I appreciate the invite. Quite frankly, I didn't think I was on that esteemed list of invites. I was flipping through Facebook a couple weeks ago and saw you and Joe Lane. I can't remember who the third person was, and my comment was, "Man, how does one get a invite to such an esteemed show?" And I got no response from that, so I figured I wasn't on the list. So I'm glad to be here.
Not only are you on the short list, you're in the top 5, baby.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
Let's get right into it, shall we? The first question is up. Let's pop that first question up. The death of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as she died, what did that mean to you?
Well, she was a legend. She was a legend for a lot of different things. I mean, she was a legend being the second only woman to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court bench. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first. She was the second. But when you look at her history and what she championed throughout the course of her career, not only as a law student, but also a law professor, and then what she meant to the women's movement. She was an icon and still is. And it's interesting, even in my own office, some of the female attorneys have things up. She became almost like a pop culture icon, and they have things hanging on their walls in tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She certainly was a member of the court that provided, I think, some valuable insight as it related to women's issues. Not without any surprise, she was a very strong voice, sometimes a very strong dissenting voice in a lot of opinions. And so, the court, when she passed away, the court lost a true legend. And what's important too is that the court lost a balancing voice. I know there's some other questions as it relates to that, but when we talk about the balance of the court, you really want a balanced court. You want to have different perspectives, and the court lost a pretty powerful and important perspective when she passed away.
I will say she was very dedicated, that she stayed all the way to the end. I was wishing that she would get a chance to get on the beach and drink a Bahama Mama or something. But we definitely need to honor what she did for this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Second question, what is the role of the Supreme Court?
Well, in our system, in our court system, there are many checks and balances, and those checks and balances were put in place centuries ago when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were put together, because those that had essentially revolted against British rule didn't want a system that had the monarchy system or the king and queen system. They didn't want a system where one person of great power made all the important decisions. They wanted to create a system that provided, I guess, fairness across the board. And along the steps of the way, there were checks and balances, in particular when it came to government. They didn't want a government that had this extreme power that over its citizens. They wanted the citizens to be able to check the government along the way. And so the Supreme Court plays a very important role. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it from the ground level up, so for example, I'll use a criminal case for an example. When a person has a trial and they're convicted, they have the right to appeal that conviction to the next level, which would be our Court of Appeals. Mm-hmm. And if they are unsuccessful at the Court of Appeals level, then they have the next level, which is the Supreme Court, our state Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that the U.S. Supreme Court usually takes on federal issues. In other words, things that are moving through the federal system. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times there's either a state constitutional amendment very close, if not similar, to the federal constitutional amendment that's being discussed at the Supreme Court level. And so, again, that Supreme Court that is the last stop, if you will, the last check and balance as you make your way through. But ultimately, their decisions carry a lot of weight, even down into the local level.
Right, and an equal balance between the president and the Congress. So we have to remember that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, again, we have different branches of government that have different powers and different responsibilities. And the judicial branch is a separate and distinct branch of government between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Mm-hmm. And again, that was done very purposefully so that not one branch had more power or more access than another branch.
All right. You're watching and listening to Torn in Two, the political show. Just a couple things that I would want to get into. If you would like to watch the show, go to www.1037thebeat.com. If you want to listen to the show as well, or if you would like to post a question, we have to get back into the questions because we have quite a lot to talk about. You hear terms like conservative or liberal appointments. What does that mean?
Well, I think it really means, who's president at the time, and who in their, I guess, political persuasion. So, for example, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as an example, was appointed by President Bill Clinton back in 1993. Mm-hmm. And there are times when presidents fulfill their term in office and they never get an opportunity to use that power designated them to nominate somebody to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, President Trump now is seeking to potentially have his third person nominated to the court. And so I think you hear those terms of liberal and conservative based on the president's political persuasions, because I think the idea is that if you are a Republican or conservative president, you're going to choose a nominee that fits your I guess your philosophy, your views on politics, and so that's where those terms come from. And I think as you look at the makeup of the court over the years and the presidents that have made those appointments, they somewhat kind of fall in line. Although sometimes even a Republican or conservative appointees surprise people. The one example that I can think of is John Roberts. When he was appointed by President Bush, but yet he became the key swing vote in the Obamacare decision that the Supreme Court had, and went in favor of President Obama. And so everybody was, the conservatives were surprised about that because Roberts was considered to be conservative, yet he fell into the other camp. And so, sometimes, justices will surprise you, I guess, in their views or how they write their opinions. And, for me, I care about justices that actually follow the law. I mean, we're as lawyers, we're required to follow the law, and we're asking our judges to do the same. It's no different because you wear a black robe.
Right. How does a person get appointed to the Supreme Court? And I know some of these questions are basic questions, but we wanted to break this down to the nth degree. So how does a person get appointed to the Supreme Court?
Well, it's interesting. I had to look this up. I had an idea, but I wanted to make sure I got it right. And what my research found is that there are no qualifications. So, for example, the Constitution requires a person who wants to be president, they have to be an American-born citizen. They have to live in the United States, and they have to be at least, I think it's 35 years old. But to be a U.S. Supreme Court justice, you don't. In fact, in my research, what was interesting is that we've had some folks who were not born in the United States sit on the Supreme Court before.
Really?
And so there are no official constitutional qualifications. Now, what's interesting is that through the years, I think the pattern and the trend has been that you see a lot of folks being nominated for that position who have gone to Ivy League schools. Maybe they've clerked for a Supreme Court justice before. More times than not, at least the last several appointments, these folks are coming out of a federal court of appeals bench. So in other words, they were appointed to a lower tiered court, and they've proven themselves. And I don't know what criteria people use, but they've proven themselves to be worthy of the Supreme Court seat. And so they get noticed that way based on the opinions they've authored, or maybe some of the books they've written. Who knows? The unfortunate thing, really, and this is true, I think, as you move up into the higher level offices in politics, is that a lot of times it's a lot about who what kind of influence you have, and how much money you can bring to the table. And that's true more in state politics than it is at the federal level. But I think to a certain extent, we miss the opportunity to have what I would call good people in certain positions, only because they lack influence, or they lack money, or they don't know the right people, and that's really unfortunate. That to me is not what politics is about. It really is who's the best person, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what their background is, and regardless of who they know or who they have known. Who's the best person? It would be interesting to see how our country would be if we really thought about that as we made these decisions.
As I said earlier, the decision to have a conservative or a liberal on the Supreme Court is so important that it took President Trump and bumped up his numbers. That's how important this is.
Yeah, I mean that. It's interesting, and I know you're a big political junkie, and you watch the news probably as much as I do, and just
more.
Well, I guarantee you probably watch it more than I do. But certainly, as I've been kind of watching and listening, again, when you're running a race, there is some strategy involved, and obviously when you are running for office, I mean, the goal is to win. Let's not kid ourselves with that. But it seems as though back in 2016, I'm sure they just said, hey, listen, why don't you, as you're running for president for the first time, tell the public, if you're elected, these are the folks that are on my short list for the Supreme Court. Apparently that somehow they learned that was a big deal to the voters out there. And now President Trump has employed that same strategy where he has announced not only here's my short list, but tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna present to the Senate my nomination, employing the same strategy. And certainly for some folks, for some voters, that's a big deal. Who sits on the Supreme Court is a very big deal. From my standpoint, again, I go back to what I said earlier. I want justices that are going to be fair, that are going to be balanced, and that are going to apply the law appropriately.
Right.
That's what I care about. And regardless of what political spectrum they sit on, that's a justice that I want. I want somebody that's going to be fair, balanced, and apply the law appropriately, because that's the charge that I have in my position. And I think that should apply to judges as well.
So the president nominates someone. The nomination goes to the Senate. The Senate, asks the person questions. They do a vote, and that's it. And it's not the 60-40 rule anymore. It's majority rule, which a person can get in with that 51 vote. And that's going to happen this time.
Well, that's what, that's the speculation. It's going to be interesting. I mean, and again, I'm going to defer to you as a political junkie. I try to dabble a little bit, but I know just enough to be dangerous. But, obviously the gamesmanship that goes on behind the scenes that we, the American public, don't really see. I'm sure the Republican caucus is going to be putting pressure on those who have maybe started to murmur about whether or not they're going to participate or confirm or not confirm. To me, that's where politics in this process maybe gets a little underhanded. And we can't kid ourselves, because that backdoor stuff is happening. I mean, to some extent, it happens even at the state level in any state, including Michigan, where caucuses are cutting deals, or legislators are cutting deals for each other's votes. That stuff's going on. Again, I think we all deserve a fair process. We all deserve something that we can sit back and say, okay, I may not agree, but at least I know it was a fair process. And that to me is really important.
I want to say hello to one of my fact checkers, Tanya Roberts Ford from Georgia. Thank you for watching. DJ, how long is the term of a justice, Supreme Court justice?
Well, it's one of the best gigs you can get, because it's lifetime. Once you are appointed, and this is true at the federal level. So any federal bench that you get appointed to, whether it be a Court of Appeals or Supreme Court, it's a lifetime appointment. So you're there as long as you want to be there. The only thing that gets you removed is obviously you retire. Well, there's three things: you retire, you die, or you do something incredibly stupid that allows allows yourself to be up for impeachment.
Right.
So just like the president, a sitting federal judge who has a lifetime appointment is subject to the rules of impeachment. And obviously, if you're doing something to get to that level, you probably shouldn't have been a judge in the first place.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lifetime appointment. And that's why a lot of times, and for good reason, obviously, when we talk about appointments to the Supreme Court, people really are take that into consideration, because again, once you're there until you don't want to be there anymore. And that could span, it could span a decade, it could span several decades, depending on how old you are at the time you make the bench. Because the other interesting fact is that, in Michigan and like some other states, to be a judge here in the state of Michigan, local judge, you have your certain qualifications. You have to be a lawyer. You have to have practiced for at least 5 years. But your term is not forever. I mean, obviously you're elected, so you face the election cycle, but you can only be a judge up and through the age of 71. Once you turn 71, you are what we call aged out, and you cannot be a judge anymore. And so there are some age restrictions in Michigan as it relates to our judges.
Should we have that on the Supreme Court, age?
It's interesting, and I'd be curious to find out why that isn't the case. Because again, you look at a person like Justice Ginsburg. She was 87 years old when she passed away, and she was on the bench at 87. And for me, I guess if as long as you're of sound mind and you got everything clicking, I don't typically worry about that too much. But I tell you, I do get a little concerned and this is true for all of us as we get older. I mean, certain things start to fade a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I go back to you don't have to be the smartest person in the world to be a judge. You really don't. But I do think that the people who rely on judges making decisions every day do deserve someone who has a clear sense of who they are, what they're doing, and how they're handling their business. And whether that's at age 70 or, heck, I've known people less than 70 who have kind of lost it a little bit. And of course, I know people who are over the age of 70 who've got it going on and sharper than I am.
Right.
And so it really is hard to delineate. Now, again, I've never heard of any story coming out of the Supreme Court where, because that would happen, where people were concerned about a justice's ability to function as a justice anymore. And, ultimately, I would imagine that maybe they're slowly and quietly and diplomatically asked to leave the bench and retire.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you, Greg. At 87, I don't plan on being a prosecutor. I'll tell you that. I'm hoping that I'm on a golf course somewhere, swinging the clubs. But
the people might keep voting you in. You might have to say no.
So I mean, it is. Age is an interesting thing, and it's an individual thing. But should the justices have an age limit? I guess that's for Congress to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Question from all the way from Georgia, one of my fact checkers, Tanya Roberts Ford. Do you think the Republicans should proceed with the filling her seat before the election?
That's a great question. It's hard to in some respects it's hard to answer because I try to take a very balanced approach as I'm listening to the news about all this and the battle back and forth between the Democrats and the Republicans. And I just wonder if the shoe were on the other foot, i.e., if there was a Democrat in the White House and it was an election year and this is happening, would the Democrats be trying to do the same thing? And I think the honest answer is yes. Now, does it make it right? I guess that's for the American public to decide. We're only, I think, as you said, we're only less than 40 days away from a pretty important election coming up here, and folks that are up for election are making these decisions. And certainly, I love what you said because if you don't exercise your constitutional right to vote, then you in some respects you don't really have a right to complain.
That's right.
And everybody has to understand because I know you've heard it, I've heard it. Everybody's like, well, my vote really doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it does matter because I think we send a very strong message when we can show that a majority of our citizens exercise that right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painful every year to see those percentages of those who actually went out and voted. But I get, again, going back to the question, should they proceed? I mean, obviously they are proceeding. Is it the right thing? I guess we'll find out in a matter of less than 45 days whether or not the American public felt it was the right thing for them to do. And then I guess we'll know our answer.
Well, especially what happened in 2016 with Lindsey Graham and the head of the Senate and all those guys saying that, they did with President Obama, saying that they shouldn't do it because he was going out, but they stalled for 11 months. And now we have an election 38 days away, and this is coming down fairly fast.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, and this is why, sometimes, being involved in politics drives me crazy. Only because I know you've been around the block a few times. I've been around the block. When you hear people say, say one thing yet do another, I've never lived my life that way. I've never worked that way, and it really bothers me when that happens. Because again, as an individual, what I have is my reputation, my character, and my integrity. And I will never put that in harm's way ever, because those are the three things that no one can ever take from me, that I can only hurt myself. And I learned a long time ago, and I had a great teacher in my parents, that those things are things that you cherish and that you stick by them and you do it.
I think you just brought up a very interesting thing. You were brought up by your parents. I think this year is an excellent year for parents to be talking to their children, because it's been such an unusual year with everything, but especially politics. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm probably not a lone voice in here. I'm looking forward for 2020 to be over. I mean,
Right.
it's been a wild and crazy year, but to your point, Greg, I mean, I think, and I have kids of my own, and I think we have a responsibility as parents to talk about these things, to engage in those conversations, because in some respects, it's our responsibility as parents to make sure that we are reinforcing the things that we've been talking about today, which is, hey, look, in not so distant future, you're going to have this wonderful right bestowed upon you, and that's that right to vote. And here is, we can't tell you how to vote, but here's some direction on what you need to do in order to make sure that your vote, that you are making an educated vote, and really encouraging and teaching our kids that importance. And so, yeah, parents have a lot of responsibility. That's a big one that I think we really have to take notice of, especially this, because of this year and all the nutty, crazy things that have been going on in 2020. It's really important that parents filter that and provide a level of information to their kids that is appropriate for their age.
Before we go to break, so somebody gets on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court makes the final decision. Those decisions can last or be effective or affect the U.S. for how many years?
Forever. Yeah, I think about some important cases that have come through the Supreme Court, and I'll use again the criminal justice system. Miranda v. Arizona, and that was, I think, a 1960 something decision that the Supreme Court handed down, and that has been in place since then, and has never. The fact that you have to essentially, when somebody's in custody and you're going to interrogate them, that you have to read them their Miranda rights.
Right.
Is a very critical and important step in the investigative process.
Well, if you look at Brown versus the Board of Education,
there you go.
Way, these are not short term. These things are decisions that could last a lifetime.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And again, that's why, folks that are sitting on that bench are important. They're important because, we never know when that opportunity is going to come where those decisions can be revisited, because they can't just revisit it on their own. A case has to come through the system in order to put that particular thing at issue, that the Supreme Court has the ability then to say, okay, we're going to take a look at this. And the only one that can overrule Supreme Court precedent is the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we're going to take a break. You're watching the prosecutor, DJ Hilson, the man. This is Torn in Two, the political show that happens every Friday live on 103.7 The Break. We have to pay some bills. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything.
Why aren't
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all. If I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Why aren't you voting?
When you vote, you can do something about everything. At voteforyourlife.com, it's never been faster or easier to make a plan to vote.
Time is running out, but you still have the chance to use your power.
Check your registration and make sure your address on file is correct.
Find your state's deadlines, learn about local candidates, and request a ballot.
You'll be able to see where candidates stand on issues you care about.
Order a ballot request form to be mailed to you with prepaid postage,
allowing you to vote early, easily, and safely.
Make a plan to vote early by finding your nearest ballot drop box, in-person polling place, or local mailbox.
And this is where you rise, this is where you shine, this is where you become the greatest of all time. History in the making.
Vote for your life.
And welcome back to Torn in Two on WUVS 103.7 to be. You're with myself, Gregory T. Roberts, and the esteemed, the illustrious, the prosecutor of Muskegon County, DJ Hilson. And I want to thank you for, because I don't claim to be an expert on everything, but I want to thank you. Now we have a question from Renee. DJ, will you continue to fight for all Muskegon County residents?
Well, I mean, I've certainly dedicated my entire prosecutorial career, which now is extended to 21 years, to fighting for Muskegon County and all its residents. And that's both here locally, based on things that we've done in the office, both trying to protect and serve victims, trying to keep our public safe, but more, and also working on programs that keep people out of the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. That to me is a win-win for everybody when we can develop things where we can make people better than worse when they walk out of the when they're done with the criminal justice system. And I've been fighting hard and bringing innovative programs here to Muskegon in order to accomplish that, but not only locally but also at a statewide level. Mm-hmm. I've been blessed with the opportunity to really engage in Lansing at our Capitol with our lawmakers to make sure that what they're doing has the interests of victims, has the interest of public safety, and has the interest of fairness in mind when they craft these laws that we are left to enforce. And so, I mean, to answer the question, absolutely, 100%. And certainly, I feel as though we've been doing that, and I've been doing that my entire career.
How rare is it for a person, this president, to have 3 appointments in one term?
I'd say that's very rare. In fact, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't even know if that's ever. Well, I shouldn't say that. Again, doing my research, and I didn't get the number, but apparently George Washington had the most appointments to the Supreme Court during his presidency. But that was, centuries ago.
Right.
So since then, having again, as I talked about, having the ability to appoint one, much less three, is pretty unprecedented.
Mm-hmm. I thought we had a question. I'm going to keep on going. So
I thought I saw a question from Melvin Burns that came.
Yeah,
across
I saw that. There was a question from Melvin Burns,
and it was there. There we go. Ratings
says, does DJ think the rating by the ABA matters with respect of appointing as justices? Should it be considered in the nomination process?
Yeah, so the American Bar Association, that's the National Association of Lawyers, and I don't know what they do as far as ratings is, how they rate, but I do think to kind of piggyback off of Mr. Burns' question, I do think that having independent agencies, and this would be a peer thing, having independent peer groups evaluate and rate, it might be a good process to have. I mean, certainly, as I talked about earlier, having the ability to have some influence or to know the right people in order to get your name on the short list for Supreme Court is one thing. But what do your peers think? What do your peers think about your abilities as a judge, as a lawyer, as a law student? To me, having a peer rating system that the general public can kind of go to and say, okay, I get what, for example, I get what the Republicans are saying about the nominee. I get what the president is saying about the nominee, but what are your peers saying about you? And that could be, if you're a sitting judge, what are other jurists thinking about you, and what are lawyers thinking about you? For last time we had a large judicial election here in Muskegon County, our local bar association put together a subcommittee of lawyers from different practices to essentially interview and evaluate the candidates for judge. Because as an association, we felt that we were in the best position to provide to the public what we as practitioners think of the individuals who want to sit on these benches and make these important decisions. That didn't go over very well with some of my esteemed colleagues in the county, and some folks that didn't like that idea all that much. But in reality, I mean, your average Joe citizen, how much do they really know about the person they're voting for judge? Because a lot of times, when you get to that nonpartisan part of the ballot, have you done your homework? Have you done your research? And do you feel comfortable and confident about the selection you're making? Because I'll tell you, this primary election, I received more phone calls from people saying, "Hey, what can you tell me about the judge's race?" And to me,
you get those phone calls too, huh?
I do. And to me, we have to come up with a system that allows the public some access to some information so they can make an informed decision. Because again, if you're not a lawyer, your chances of running into a judge in a courtroom are relatively slim. And so, you don't really know who they are or what they were like before they decided to run for judge and all that kind of stuff. So I think, certainly some sort of avenue like an ABA or a local bar association providing input would be important, again, when we're making these very important decisions.
I'm going to go to this question. We have 9 Supreme Court justices, right? There has been some talk from the party that's not in control, which would be the Democrat Party, that when they get in control, that they might add to the number, which currently is 9, but they might add more judges so the court would be more liberal. Are you in favor of that?
Well, what's interesting, Greg, is, and again, it's something, it's a little known fact that I didn't know until I kind of looked at it, but the Constitution does not designate the number of justices. In fact, it leaves that power to Congress. So Congress makes that determination. And the court in its early stages fluctuated between, at one point they had 6 justices when it started out, then it fluctuated up to 10, and 11, went back down to 9, and it's been 9 ever since. And so and I think it's important. The other important thing is that you have to have an odd number. You have to have an odd number so that you're not in that tie situation. Because if you had 10 and there's a 5-5 split, who makes the determination as to the decision? Because you have to have a majority in order for a decision to actually become precedent. And so we need odd numbers. Now, whether or not adding additional judges to the bench, going from 9 to 11 or to 13 or to 15, whether or not that creates some sort of balance, again, you have to be careful what you wish for, because just like the Republican reign will end at some point in time and the Democrats will have some power for a while, it flip-flops back and forth, and you never know when on that pendulum the president or the Senate, whatever party's in power, is going to have that ability. So you can imagine that even though you want to add and you want to stack, well, that stacking isn't going to last forever. And how long is it going to be where it's going to flip to the other side? So I guess it doesn't make it right or wrong, but obviously you really have to be cautious about what you ask for.
Okay. Good thing I have my glasses here. Sandra says, as a prosecutor, in time of change, what are your plans on crime reduction through rehabilitation and reentry? Also, are there any plans to address an expansion in the community placement program for youth involved within the juvenile justice system in Muskegon County?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we've been doing that for the last 4 years. One of the biggest success stories that Muskegon has is our exit program, and exit stands for ex-offenders in transition, and it was born out of a Department of Labor, Federal Department of Labor grant, and now has transitioned to our own Michigan Department of Corrections is funding this program. Mm-hmm. And in its essence, what it is it's taking individuals who are incarcerated and starting the process while they're incarcerated, getting them into our exit center, which is the old jail down on Pine Street, so just a few blocks from our current jail, where they're getting college level classes in CAD drawing, blueprint reading. They're going down to the new Sturgis Center downtown and working on the 3D printers and the foundry and all that, learning all that stuff. Also learning life skills like balancing budgets and bringing up their math and reading skills. And as they go through this 3-phase process, by the time they reach phase 3, they are now beefing up the resume and sitting down for interviews and getting jobs in our local manufacturing companies here in Muskegon. That has been wildly successful. In fact, it's the only program that exists in the state of Michigan. We've now expanded that, which been awesome. So during the whole COVID crisis, things had to quiet down for a while because nobody could go anywhere and nobody was moving anywhere, doing anything. And as a result of that, because of the extra funds we had from the DOC, they've allowed us to actually expand and put in the jail teleconference abilities. So not only do we have our center down the street, but we're now able to offer virtual classes inside the facility itself. And the benefit to that has been, for the longest time, this was a male-only program because state regulations do not allow incarcerated males and females to coexist, to essentially cohabitate in a space. Mm-hmm. Because of now this expanded virtual, we're now able to bring women into the program because they can do it virtually from the facility. Mm-hmm. So that's just one example of where we have worked really hard really hard to expand the reentry, because I'm a huge believer in this idea that we have to find better ways in order to, as these folks come out of the jail or come out of the criminal justice system, we have to find better ways to get them back on their feet and give them opportunities. That's why, you know, guys like Nate Johnson and I have worked really hard together on various programs. Again, that's why Exit has been so successful. I brought to Muskegon through another DOC grant, a federal grant, where we're working on an innovative probation program right now that is dealing with our young, what I'll call on the fence violent offenders, and providing them some different opportunities and resources to try and get them to understand that there's a better and brighter path, not deciding to get yourself involved in a violent conflict. There are 3 areas in the nation that got this grant, one being Dallas, one being Philadelphia, and one being little old Muskegon.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen outside of my relationship with the Department of Corrections and fighting to have Muskegon be the pilot for this program. And so, I certainly appreciate the question and understand that, you know, I believe that part of my role and responsibility is, again, not only to the public safety aspect and in protecting and serving victims, but it's also being a voice working for proactive change in the way that we deal with our returning citizens.
Mhm.
We have to do better, and that's just not on my end, but that's on the business side of things. You know, businesses have to understand that you have to take a chance on these folks, that don't let their past dictate what their future is.
That's right.
And so we're really working hard to really set. To me, what I want to do is set Muskegon apart from everybody else, and we've done that in a couple of these areas, but we can do a little bit better. So I'm looking forward to continuing to champion those efforts.
Well, Muskegon, thank you. The questions are coming in here really fast. We continue to hold parents accountable for not sending their children to school and pill mill physicians.
So on Monday, I got a really important meeting on Monday with the superintendents and whoever else they want to send from all the districts here in Muskegon, because I had sent an email middle August. I sent an email to the ISD, the intermediate school district here in Muskegon, saying, "Hey, look, school's going to be different, and we need to. I want to hear from schools how we can help support them in making sure their kids are attending, whether it be virtually or in person."
Mm-hmm.
And that was put off, and finally, I was getting phone calls from different districts. And I finally said, "Hey, look, we got to meet, because otherwise I'm going to be getting these individual phone calls, and I need to sit down and I need to hear from these districts, and we need to come up with a plan." So finally, we got that plan in place, or at least the meeting in place for Monday, and having that discussion, because, you know, schools still, and I don't disagree with this, schools still need their kids to follow whatever plan they put in place, whatever plan the government has said, yes, you can go forward with that. They need to follow through with that. And again, I go back to an earlier comment about the importance of being a parent. Again, as a parent myself, parents have to do their darndest to make sure their kids are following through with what they're required to do. Now, I have great sympathy for those folks that, you know, are struggling with figuring out, well, when my kid is at home virtually, what am I supposed to do? Do I go to work? Do I give up my job? Or do I stay home and make sure they're doing their schoolwork? Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I have absolute sympathy and empathy for those decisions. And, you know, certainly part of what my thoughts are on enforcement and accountability takes all that into consideration, because we can't expect parents to make these crucial decisions and not, you know, without holding their kids responsible too, because at a certain age, you know, kids have to take ownership and responsibility for their own future. And so I'm really interested to hear the supers talk on Monday, and hopefully come up with a plan that we can universally spread throughout the districts, that, again, stress the importance of education, opening doors of opportunity, but more importantly, as the question is asking, making sure that students and parents understand that there still is accountability, even in these times of a pandemic.
Okay. Now I need you to take off that hat and put on another hat.
Yes, sir.
You put the prosecutor hat on.
Will do.
The verdict was handed down, 180 days, I believe, 190 days. The verdict was handed down in the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville. Can you explain how the grand jury works in Muskegon?
So Michigan itself does not have a grand jury system. There are certain states and certain jurisdictions that have a grand jury system, and it's essentially, if you've ever seen a crime drama show and they've gone to the grand jury, you've seen somewhat what it looks like. Now, our federal system, so the federal system here in the state of Michigan, just like every state in the nation, does have a grand jury system, but local state systems do not. In essence, what a grand jury is similar to what a regular jury is. Folks who live in cities and jurisdictions that have grand juries get jury notices, just like you get a jury notice here in Muskegon if you're being called to serve on a jury.
Mm-hmm.
Their service is a little bit different. A lot of times, instead of being a week, it might be a month. I think in the federal system, it's lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 months. Your service is required.
Mm-hmm.
But in essence, what it is you're sitting in a room, and the number of jurors, if you will, varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But you're sitting in a room. It's the prosecutor, and this is the prosecutor's deal. A defense attorney is not typically allowed in a grand jury room because grand jury proceedings are normally secret. And essentially, the prosecutor is presenting their case to the grand jury, and the grand jury's role is to determine was there a crime committed, and is there probable cause to believe that a crime was committed, and do we have a probable cause to believe that the person that they have targeted as the suspect there's probable cause to charge that person. So essentially, witnesses are testifying. They're testifying under oath, under penalty of perjury.
Mm-hmm.
And the citizens then make the determination as to whether or not A, a crime was charged, and B, if a crime was committed, and B, who should be charged for that particular crime. Now, in Michigan, that role and responsibility falls on my shoulders and my assistant's shoulders. We essentially play the role of grand jury, where when we read police reports, we're making those determinations as to was there a crime committed, and is there a probable cause to believe that the person that they have listed as the suspect committed that crime. So ultimately, those decisions are falling on us as individual prosecutors and not being presented to a grand jury. But those are the differences.
Which is leads me into the next question. Do you feel in the Taylor case, should that have gone to trial?
Well, listen, Greg, and I'm not trying to skirt this issue, but I don't have really a sufficient, grasp of the facts. I don't know what was presented to the grand jury. I was actually watching the news this morning, and the governor of Kentucky is looking to unseal those proceedings. I would love to get an opportunity to see that, to evaluate that for myself, because, as a practitioner, as a person that works in the criminal justice field, when these things are happening on a national level, my interest is always piqued, because I know from personal experience the effort and the evidence that is necessary in order to even sometimes reach a probable cause level. Mm-hmm. So I would like to maybe come back to that question, if and when we're able to actually see everything that was presented. Because just like I would never want to second guess one of my colleagues across the state, I don't want to second guess anybody without having in front of me everything that they looked at. I think that's only fair.
That's fair. Okay. Has the Muskegon County court system been fair to the African Americans in the past 20 years? If not, what have you done to make sure that the system is fair to everyone?
Well, I mean, I think I think our system probably needs some tweaks for certain. In the past 20 years, have I seen some positive changes to make it fair across the board? I would say yes to that. And I say yes to that because of the advent and the introduction to our system of specialty courts. So, for example, sobriety court, recovery court for those battling substance or drug addictions, and the Veterans Treatment Court. I've seen a mixture of all races going through those courts, and those courts are set up not for the purpose of punishment, but for the purpose of treatment. And so, you're seeing some fair and balanced treatment in those avenues. As it relates to how judges are whether or not judges are being fair across the board, based on similar circumstances and similar crimes, those are questions that judges need to ask. They have an oversight system, if you will. The Supreme Court Administrator's Office oversees, the conduct of judges. They have what's called the Judicial Tenure Commission, which oversees, the behavior and conduct of judges, just like we have an Attorney Grievance Commission that oversees the behavior and conduct of us lawyers. And so I think certainly we all have to make sure that we're all being held accountable. From my end, when we evaluate a case, I can guarantee you that race is not part of that evaluation. I don't care if you're gray, blue, green, a yellow. It doesn't make any difference to me or my assistants when we're looking at a case. What we care about is what's going to be fair, what's going to be just, and how are we going to not only serve, if there's a victim involved, what's justice for that victim. But again, I go back to some of the other things that I'm involved in. How can we structure this in a way that allows this individual who is charged with the case going through the criminal justice system an opportunity to sort of right the ship, so by the time he or she is getting out, they're on a different path and making different decisions. That's why exit is so important. That's why my diversion, both at the juvenile level and at the adult level, is so very, very important. And that's why, I take very, very wholeheartedly this idea of the expungement, the expungement process, and making sure, because I'll tell you, and I'm learning now that our expungement process is probably going to be changing, which is a good thing, because I think currently the law on expungements is terrible. They haven't done justice. The lawmakers have not done justice to those who are trying to do what's right and trying to relieve themselves of that baggage. And so, yeah, do we have some work to do, I think, to continue to make it equal and fair? Absolutely. Is there a perception out there that it isn't? Probably. But again, I think you have to look at the individual circumstances, the individual and the crime that was committed, their history and the impact on the community. But at the end of the day, for me, as I always preach to my assistants and in my policies, it's all about being fair and reasonable. That's why we don't overcharge people. That's why we're fair. We try to be fair and balanced in the sentence recommendations that we're making to the court. But at the end of the day, judges determine sentence. All we determine is what the charge is, and ultimately, what they're going to plead to.
Last question from Tanya Roberts Ford. So, in Kentucky, does the prosecutor work for the grand jury?
No, it's just the process. The prosecutor does not. The grand jury does not work for the prosecutor. It is a independent, separate entity. Like I said, where just like in our jury system, there's a random draw. People get these notices in the mail to fill out the questionnaire. They send the questionnaire back, and then they're randomly drawn. And whatever their term of service is, and I don't know what it is for Kentucky, but it could be, in a grand jury system, your term of service is a lot longer than it is as a normal trial juror. So in Muskegon, if you're summoned for jury service for trial, your service is for a week. In a grand jury system, it probably is going to be longer than that, month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. But there is no connection other than the grand jury is for the prosecutor to present evidence to, and that's it. They don't work for each other.
Okay. DJ, will you come back? Because there are some questions. Well, we got time for this one. Recently, a young black man was who was charged with murder and was let out on bond. He was killed shortly after he was released. What went wrong there?
Well, I'll tell you. What's really upsetting, and it cuts both ways, because there's a lot of bond and bail reform happening in our state for good reasons. But in these cases, my office typically does not appear in court for a bond hearing, except for murder cases. And all the time that we're appearing in murder cases, we're asking the court to set an extremely high bond or no bond. The statute and the court rules allow for the court to not set any bond in a homicide case.
Mm-hmm.
And, I appreciate the idea that people are presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
I totally appreciate and accept that. But, certainly it's for these very reasons why we ask the court to post high bonds, not only for the safety and security of the public, but also the safety and security of the individual accused.
Mm-hmm.
And in this situation, the court set a pretty low bond, and that person's family decided to bond him out.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, what happened, and it's unfortunate. But
Sure.
At that point in time, when the judge sets the bond, we have our hands are tied and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I know we advocated for something a lot higher than what was said.
I know we've gone long, but last question: how many black prosecutors do you have?
I've had the luxury in my career to hire 3 black prosecutors in the office. Of those 3, I have 1 in the office currently. And I tell you, it's always been my goal to make sure that the office reflects the community that it serves. And I'll be honest with you, it's becoming last 5 or 6 hires that I've been able to be a part of. It's becoming harder and harder to get people to actually apply for this position, these positions. The number of applicants that I receive in an open position has dwindled over the last few years. And I don't know what that is, whether or not people don't want to be in public service anymore, or the money isn't right. I'm not sure, but I've even gone and asked guys like Judge Pittman to send out our notice for employment through his Black Law Society folks, and gone to the NAACP and tried to encourage more minority applicants, because the folks that I've been able to hire over the years, the minority, have been awesome. They've been a great contribution to the office. They fit in well with the staff, and they offer something that I've always wanted, which is they're reflecting the community that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I just need more people, more minorities to apply.
Okay.
I really do.
DJ, we need to have you back. Will you promise me that you will come back?
Listen, Greg, anytime that you call, I will be back. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. This is a great show, and I would be honored to be back.
Okay, next week we're tackling the issue of mental health with Cedric Scott and others. The following week we'll have Melvin Burns back in the studio, Tanya Roberts Ford from Georgia, and for fact-checking different issues. And if you have questions, please see the Facebook site for 103.7 The Beat, or go to the internet, www.103.7thebeat.com. Let us know what you think. You can call the business number 727-5007 if there's anything that you want us to talk about. DJ, thank you again. I want to thank PA and Lady J. We went long, but the questions were coming in. Thank you so much. People, get involved, vote. This election is closer than you think. You've been watching Touring Into with Gregory T. Roberts. We'll see you next week.